The business of winning basketball games has changed. Golden State is now financially stable, but will a stable product on the hardwood come with it? We're talking about it right now on Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? How we doing? Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen, free and available wherever you get your audio podcasts and streaming on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. My name's Charlie Walter, a former sportscaster at CBS and 95.7 The Game host in San Francisco. Had the privilege of covering the Warriors' last title in 2022. And joining the show today, a very, very special guest that you can hear on national radio. It is Amy Lawrence, host of the national program After Hours with Amy Lawrence. So if you listen to KNBR after the graveyard shift late at night, early in the morning, you hear Amy's voice. So today on the show, we're breaking down how the luxury tax has affected the Warriors this offseason. We've also spent so much time talking about Lauri Markkanen. Let's talk non-hypotheticals, like the stalwarts, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, plus the Dubs need a cornerstone. Who could it be when those players move on? But first of all, Amy, it's good to finally see you. I know we've talked on the radio. The last time that you interviewed me, I had the broken foot about a month before I married Kylan. We went through with it. I hobbled down the aisle to the altar, and we've made it 2 years. So good to see you.
I actually have gotten married too since the last time we spoke, which is kind of cool.
Congrats.
So yes, a newlywed. I didn't have to hobble, didn't trip on my dress. Nothing untoward happened till I got to the aisle. But yeah, just 7 months ago, actually. So it's an all new world for me.
Yeah, congratulations. I told you mine was a basketball related injury. Someone landed on the foot, metatarsal, but that's for another day and another time. We made it and we're fully healed. The Warriors financially are fully healed. And I want to break down the luxury tax out of the gate because it's so confused. I mean, we're talking aprons. When did aprons start getting involved with basketball? I have no idea, but it's affected the Warriors as much as any team. Financially right now, they're in a good spot. But on paper, it's not like they're a contender in the West. And the boss, Joe Lacob, has also said the goal is never to be a lottery team. So I wonder, is this basketball purgatory? What's your take on everything that's happened financially and where the Dubs stand?
Well, overall, I do think it's good for the league. And you talk about the confusion around the luxury tax and around what is a salary cap, but not really a salary cap. Fans get lost in it. There's exceptions, the Bird exception. You can pay your own guy a max deal. It doesn't matter. So I like the fact that the NBA is trying to get the spending under wraps because let's be honest, even with some of these brand new TV deals that pay billions, the B word, right? There still needs to be some type of cap. Otherwise, you don't have as competitive a playing field. And that definitely can be a concern. I think there are a lot of people that don't want to see the NBA start to look more like Major League Baseball, where you have a few teams that are only ever going to be able to offer some of the massive contracts. So I do like the theory in concept. And I do think it's been good to see some of the teams start to rein in their spending, to draw back a little bit and have to figure out the puzzle. That's what the NFL front offices do. There's a puzzle and you have to figure it out. Now, I still say it's pretty confusing, but overall, I like the idea that you may have a team that can go from worst to first in its division, or a team that can make the right moves, fitting under that umbrella, and can have a formula because I think the scouting and the due diligence, all of that becomes so much more paramount than it is when you can just spend whatever you want. Okay, that was a bullseye. Well, actually, that was a huge miss. And it doesn't really matter for some teams. But in this case, really, you have to know what you're getting into before you offer guys deals. And of course, it has to make sure that it fits underneath that umbrella. So I know it's pruning, right? It's a painful process when it's going on. But I think having all the NBA teams on that playing field is not a bad thing.
The Warriors put themselves in a tough spot after they won the championship, extending Wiggins, extending Jordan Poole, throwing all that money, and then firing off a 4-year deal to Draymond Green as well. You put in all those money to some players, and eventually Uncle Sam's going to start calling. And that's what happened in this situation. Joe Lacob's done a really nice job of getting under the tax, avoiding it completely. Giving away Chris Paul's contract for nothing, getting rid of him, getting away from Klay Thompson and bringing in some mid-level exemption players. When you look at where the Warriors stand right now, financially and everything, the big three from a national perspective, now that it's broken up and Klay Thompson has moved on, do you think that had to do with finances completely, or do you see it more from the fact that, finances may have been used as an excuse, but really what it comes down to at the end of the day is the Warriors thought they had a better chance of winning without Klay Thompson and looking elsewhere?
I don't think that's the case. I do believe that both Steve Kerr and Steph Curry are genuine when they sit in front of microphones and they talk about how hard it's going to be without Klay, when they talk about life post Klay and how strange that's going to be. I honestly believe that they wanted to see him back in the fold. And as much as I love Klay Thompson, and I do, I am on my show all the time talking about how much I appreciate his return from 2.5 years away, his redemption story, winning a title. That 2022 championship meant more to Klay Thompson than it could have meant to anybody else on the planet because of what he had been through. We know he's an emotional girl, so to speak. I mean, there are times when his emotions get the best of him. Also, I think his pride probably contributed to his exit from Golden State. And that's not a unique story. We get that with athletes all the time, right? They think they're worth more. They think a franchise should value them more. But I don't suppose anybody wants to point out that he had a deal on the table that is more than what he got from the Dallas Mavericks. So honestly, with Klay, I do believe the Warriors wanted him back. They had a place financially where they could slot him in. He felt like he was worth more. Mostly, though, I love what Steph had to say, and I agree with this because I'm also an emotional girl. I just want Klay to be happy. I want Klay to find this fresh start, a new challenge, to play basketball with a smile again, because he used to love that about Klay Thompson, his joy. He never needed to be the star, though, of course, he would have been a star on pretty much any franchise that he played for. The fact that he didn't mind playing alongside Steph, where Steph attracted all the attention, the Splash Brothers, but most of the splash was on Steph's side, the razzle, the dazzle. But Klay was so good on both ends of the court, and he just loved hoops. So we know how hard it was for him to be off the court for 2.5 years. I really do hope that he finds joy and that he gets back to doing what he loves and goes out there with that wild abandon and is able to just play free, because that's not the guy we've seen since the 22 title. And so I do believe, again, the Warriors wanted him back. They offered him a salary that clearly was commensurate, because there wasn't another offer that came from Orlando or even Dallas that would pay him more than what they were offering him. I hope he doesn't regret it, but I do think the Warriors did their due diligence. This was more about Klay just needing something different and not feeling valued.
So when we go back to the finances, and the talk has been Lowry Markkanen, or we've also heard Brandon Ingram to a lot lesser scale. We heard Paul George to a higher scale, but the Warriors ended up saying, not worth it at the end of the day, taking on that age, and really just doesn't fit into what we're looking to do right now, unless it involves not giving away Jonathan Kuminga. And obviously the Clippers said, no, we would like Jonathan Kuminga. So they looked elsewhere in regards to that. But when you see Golden State right now and where they stand, if they were to go after like a Lowry Markkanen, and I know I said at the beginning of the show I was not going to bring up his name once because it's all we're talking about in the Bay Area right now, but I don't even want to talk about it from a fit, Amy. I just want to talk about it from like a financial perspective, because I don't think you can have Lowry and Jonathan Kuminga and extend them both. It seems like Joe Lacob is pretty happy in terms of moving forward, staying under this tax, and not, taking on some of the negative repercussions that come from spending all this money.
Couple of things that come to mind. Number one, I think that it's still maybe where you're aware from seeing how these young players really fit in. I know the Andrew Wiggins piece, that's been tough. You mentioned they paid him. He's gone through some injuries. He was away for that personal time for what felt like months last season, maybe even half the season. He still can be really valuable, but maybe that's not a great use of the money they paid him. However, you've got a bunch of young guys, including Kuminga and Trace, even Brandon. I like the fact that they fit in so well last year, and we're just starting to scratch the potential for these guys who will be second-year players or third-year players. So I think there's maybe a room, some space to see how they continue to grow, how they get better as players, how they fit what the Warriors want to do. And actually, you may find this crazy, but I think the Buddy Hield move fits really well too. I know that it blew me away when I looked up his age and realized he's 31, because it feels like he just got into the league a few years ago from Oklahoma. And yet he's one of the best three-point shooters in the entire league, which means that they still can do that spread out style where the ball gets whipped around, where defenses have to choose, where you can catch the defense off guard. The Steve Kerr formula of wanting all 5 players to touch the ball, of moving the ball faster than the defense can recover, and finding the open man, that to me still works with the Buddy Hield. Now, I do know his size maybe can pose a problem. You wonder about the defense in the backcourt and how some of the other terrific Western Conference backcourts can pose a headache for the Warriors. So there's something to be said there. But I do like that they've got a Hield who can step in there. Chris Paul wasn't the answer, of course. He's lost a step. He's clever. He's crafty. But that's not, it wasn't going to be a long-term solution. And Hield's a little bit younger than Steph. But maybe let's see how these younger guys develop. Who knows? There could be a star among them. So I don't think that there's a need to go knee-jerk and, as you point out, go crazy over a star or over a player that would put them in the hole again, and you're not even sure it's going to be a fit. The only thing about the Warriors, outside of their championship year in 22, that is, I think, is a danger, is that it's almost like they're in basketball purgatory, which is not something that you expect from the Warriors, right? But being irrelevant in sports is actually worse than being the worst team in the league. Yeah. I think if nobody's talking about you, that's a tougher fate than really challenging for a lottery pick. Not that the Warriors want to do that, but they keep getting stuck in this 8, 9, 10 range. I know sometimes there's injuries, so that's a factor too. The challenges last year with an older Chris Paul, Klay Thompson in and out of the starting lineup, Andrew Wiggins being gone. You would hope those things don't happen again this coming season. But I honestly think we haven't gotten to the point where we know exactly how these young guys are going to fit in. And who knows? The Warriors were homegrown. The 5 consecutive NBA finals, that was largely around players that were homegrown. So maybe there's an opportunity here this season, even as Steph continues to kill it. I mean, he's crushing it with Team USA. He's going to be a starter for the Olympic team. See how those guys develop in the offseason and then early in the regular season. And maybe there's something to using the guys you've got as opposed to going out and make this big financial splash that's hit or miss. It's a risk.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the fans are saying right now. They're saying it's time to trust the fruits of our own labor, A, and B,
I like it.
Let's use the mantra, hold the rope. Coming up, we've talked so much about Steph Curry's title window and how the Warriors need to give him another chance, but it's Draymond Green's window as well. Amy gives her thoughts on the Warriors' heartbeat. I'm a big fan of going to Major League Baseball games during the summer, whether it's, hopping down on the Caltrain, heading down to Oracle Park, watching some Giants baseball, eating some crab out in center field. I know it's about $25, but there's a lot of good times to be had at baseball games. And the Gametime app makes it perfect to get your tickets. Some of my favorite features, how about last-minute tickets? You can get up to 60% off by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it may be. If you have last-minute plans, perfect. You're saving some money. Also, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Also, the lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Amy, let's talk about Draymond Green, the Warriors' heartbeat, who we spend so much time talking hypotheticals and discussing the young players. But Draymond, when Joe Lacob said and Bob Myers said and Steve Kerr has said and all the players have discussed how they wanted to go out together, the big three. It's not going to happen because Klay was the first domino that fell by heading over to Dallas. So now that all three are not going out together, is it an instance of maybe the two go out together, Draymond and Steph Curry, or could he be the next domino to fall? Like, what is your thoughts on how this relationship works out moving forward, especially with some of the incidents that he's had that have, quite frankly, it's not even quite frankly, it's evident have hurt the team and the franchise in the past few years?
I love Draymond Green's journey as a man, as a player, as a leader, as the heartbeat of the Warriors, as you call it. Yeah, he's made some really, really humongous mistakes that have crippled not just his team, but have even crippled the team beyond the current season. They had to get rid of Jordan Poole because of the situation that happened that Draymond created, where he got into an altercation with him. But here's the deal about Draymond. He's huge on loyalty. And I know loyalty is kind of a lost art in sports. Everyone understands it's a business. But Dre and Steve Kerr and Steph Curry have a relationship that is built on trust and loyalty. We know that Steve talks about it a lot. When trust is broken, it really hurts the whole team. He has placed his trust in Draymond going back to the point at which he made him the starter and the centerpiece of that defense. He recognized Dre's potential long before we all knew what Draymond Green was about. I love when Dre gets all arrogant. In fact, I've said this a bunch. If I could pick one athlete in the entire world to host a radio show with, it would be Draymond Green, because you always get the honesty. When he gets arrogant and he talks about how I built this defense, well, honestly, it's true, is it not? And that's one reason why Steve is so brilliant at what he does, because he understands. He thinks outside the box. He's doing it with Team USA. He understands how to put his guys in position to be the most successful. And to build around Draymond Green was the key. Yes, Steph is one of the best players we've ever seen. But to build around Draymond Green, the system around Dre, was the key to them rattling off those 5 consecutive trips to the NBA Finals and winning the 4 rings. And so if they weren't going to ditch Dre by now, they aren't going to do it at this point. That's the thing. And Draymond Green may decide he wants to retire rather than play for another team. I talk about the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, similar to how I talk about the Chiefs and their core. Think about the number of times that Kansas City has changed the receivers around Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce. So speaking offense, of course, the number of times they've changed coordinators and coaches, and yet it's those 3 that teach the rest of the group what it means to be a Chief, what it means to play like a champion. Patrick Mahomes is so good. He's the Steph Curry, obviously, in this situation, the quarterback. He is so good that he makes everybody else around him better. But you know what Travis Kelce does too? He may not get the attention as much. This is pre-Taylor Swift, of course, but he is the heart and soul and the toughness and the grit and the vocal leadership, similar to what Draymond Green is. They have similar roles. And then obviously Andy Reid and Steve Kerr, they're just incredible architects. So I do think that Draymond Green, he's going to be there for the rest of his career, because, again, if they were going to ditch him to the curb, or if they were going to part ways with him over everything that happened, they probably would have done it by now. He and Steph have a connection that is only forged through the fire, through adversity, and through time. Their connection cannot be replicated. And as much as I hate to say this, because I miss Klay every single game that he wasn't out there when he was hurt, I'm telling you, I'm a Klay Thompson apologist. The thing is, they had to rely on the 2 of them. That connection was even deepened by the fact that Klay was gone for 2.5 years. So they know what it's like to not have Klay Thompson. I know the first year Dre and Steph didn't play a lot, but they've obviously gone through that, where Klay wasn't available, wasn't even around the team. And so the 3 of them speak the same language. I call Steph and Dre an old married couple in sports, where they don't even really need to communicate with words. They're just that good. And that relationship I love. And I still say, you call Dre the heartbeat, I still say it's the 2 of them, it's Steve Kerr, and that makes the Warriors who they are, even though Klay will be missed.
And Draymond obviously still has a ton of influence surrounding the franchise. I know that Steph Curry is obviously involved in every single decision that's made. I would imagine Draymond Green to some extent is too. I remember when Klay decided he was moving on, he called both those players and said, Steph, Dre, here's the deal. I'm moving on. I don't want you to use any of your powers to go to the executive team and tell them to keep me or offer me this money. We need him, whatever. Like, no. And that, to me, says that Draymond still has a lot of influence in how this thing is going to work out. Knowing that he's got just a few years left with the Warriors, and he obviously wants to win his 5th title just like Steph Curry. Do you think that he's embracing this young nucleus, or do you think, and this is obviously 1,000% speculative, that's what we do on podcasts, or do you think he is in the camp of, if we can find the right player, maybe we go out and get him, even if that's, halfway through the year at the deadline? Like, what do you think he wants to do? Because he's talked about Kuminga and Bajemski being, potential elite players moving forward, but he's going to say that about anyone, right?
I don't know. I think he's pretty honest, obviously.
True.
He says what's on his heart. I don't think he has a great V chip, although I do think that he's getting more and more mature. It's crazy, right? Because he's in his 30s. You wouldn't think that would be necessary, but he's gone through a lot, and I feel like it's changed him a bunch. I love seeing him with his kids. You can tell how much he loves being a dad and how much they adore him. There's just something to aging. And I say this about old dudes. I call them old dudes in sports. They're in touch with their own mortality when it comes to the sports world. They recognize this kind of success that the Warriors have had. It's generational, right? It doesn't happen for everyone. Think about Chris Paul. He was with them for 1 year. He's now on to his 7th team in the NBA. And in essence, he's given up, he says, chasing a ring. At this point now, he likely will go down along with Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, best players who've never won a title, unless something crazy happens with the Spurs while he's there. But he just wants to play. He just wants to be out there. Well, when it comes to Dre, I think he really, loves the process. You can tell he gets into the nuts and bolts. Also, have you not noticed that he loves being the godfather? He talks, I love his podcast. I'm sure you listen to it too.
Oh, yeah.
He loves talking about some of the young guys and the kids, as he calls them, in basketball. And so I do think that there's that element to it as well. Not only does he like being the heartbeat, being the big man on campus, having the young guys look up to him, but I really think he likes bestowing his wisdom. And so I do think he, more even probably than Steph, appreciates that role as someone who's going to leave the NBA better than when he found it. But yeah, the maturity, I even thought after his suspension last year that we saw a different Dre. Not that he can't still lose his mind and get technical fouls, but just the cognizance that what you're doing isn't just about you. It affects everybody else around you. And that's been a pretty cool journey to watch, even though he still runs his mouth and ticks people off. But I honestly think that he's becoming even more endearing as he gets older, because he's just a different guy. And that affects how he wants to leave the game, I think.
The Godfather. I love that. I gotta get on Photoshop for the YouTube thumbnail and get him in a zoot suit or something and make that the thumbnail title. That's good stuff. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, 2 timeline plan involved a cornerstone. Unfortunately, the Dubs struck out with James Wiseman. Who could the next player be? Is he already on the roster? Maybe some unhappy stars that are looking to have a divorce with their current teams. We'll discuss with Amy Lawrence. All right, so that 2 timeline plan that the Golden State Warriors had of bringing in James Wiseman and using their lottery picks and deciding not to trade them and hoping that, they could get this crossover from the last few years of Steph Curry's prime and Draymond Green's prime and Klay Thompson and all these guys, and then kind of transition the guard to Poole and to Wiggins and to Wiseman and Kuminga. Thus far, it looks like it's failed miserably. However, there are still guys on the roster like Bajemski and Kuminga and, Trace Jackson Davis that could maybe take that leap, be all-star caliber, and be really good players for this team. But in terms of a cornerstone, because I talked about it the other day, is every championship team needs a superstar. I mean, you go back the last 25 years, there may be one, but I doubt it. I think if you went down every single team since the turn of the millennium, they've had an all-NBA player, a second-team all-NBA player on that squad that has helped vault them to hoisting the trophy. So when we look at that and who the Warriors cornerstone could be moving forward, because Steph Curry, eventually Father Time's going to catch up to him. He may be 42 years old, but even at that point, in 6 years from now and another contract later, they're going to have someone to fill that void. Do you believe that players on the roster, or should we be looking at trades and free agency maybe down the road? Because Lauri Markkanen's not that guy. I don't think Brandon Ingram's that guy. Zach LaVine's not that guy. Players that the Warriors have, and Paul George, quite frankly, with the age factor, is not that guy either. So, like, where do the Dubs find their next superstar? And sometimes it comes overnight. I don't think many Dubs fans thought it would be Steph Curry year 2.
It's funny, just a quick tangent because you said that about Steph too, and the expectations for him at the beginning. Maybe you remember when he was just a skinny guy who could shoot the three, and people didn't think he was going to be so good at handling the ball, that his court vision and his passing skills were going to be next level, that he was going to be a guy who could withstand the rigors of the pounding. And that was the MO on him early on, right? The rest of the guards in the league were going to pound him, play physical, wear him out. And it worked, not to mention he got hurt a couple times in his early part of his career. But he bulked up. He got smarter, obviously. He learned how to withstand the rigors of a long season. And it's recently something that dawned on me. Caitlin Clark's in the exact same position in the WNBA. And I know all the NBA guys, they love her. But I've made this comparison on my show where Caitlin's rise to popularity and superstardom is pretty similar to Steph Curry's. So it bodes well for her future in the league. But remember, the two of them were relatively unknown college players, but because their games were so dazzling and entertaining, and their teams made deep runs into the NCAA tournament, March Madness with the world watching, Steph for Davidson, obviously his sophomore and junior years, and then Caitlin with Iowa, they catapulted to superstardom, and people started watching the Warriors because of Steph. People are now watching the Fever. They've already set an attendance record, and they're only halfway through their season. People watch them and the WNBA because of Caitlin, and they love what they see elsewhere. But I love the way that those two stories really line up. And I think for Caitlin, her path will be one in which she gets smarter and stronger and wiser about the league. And that's Steph Curry. So in my opinion, to get back to what you asked, I think that they need to find someone who can fit that mold. So as much as we could throw out names of forwards, we could throw out names of big men, because right now big men are all the rage when it comes to MVPs. I honestly think they need a quarterback. No one's going to shoot as well as Steph Curry. Well, who knows? Maybe Caitlin Clark. But for the most part, Steph is otherworldly, right? But don't you need someone who can come in and play that role? He runs the team along with Draymond, if Draymond happens to outlast him by a couple of years. So call me crazy. I know this is nuts. Anthony Edwards. Their teammates on Team USA. Anthony's 22 years old. I mean, certainly he's got an ego to match Draymond Green, but he will at some point be a free agent. Why? Because okay, there's a couple of things here. So I'm getting all excited.
I'm getting excited. I love Anthony Edwards.
All right. So when the Timberwolves lost Karl Anthony Towns, they were a 1 seed in the West. It maybe 2 months before the regular season ended. There was a lot of talk that they were going to plummet. The Nuggets were going to pass them. The Thunder were going to pass them. They actually treaded water and ended up staying right there in the top 3. And it was because of Anthony Edwards. Remember the highlight reel? He dislocated a finger, jamming a ball home. He hit his head on the rim, making a game-saving block. So he's crazy. The man's crazy. But he's got all kinds of energy and athleticism, and he's getting smarter. He can carry a team. He can propel a team. And then the second part of that is, as much as the Timberwolves have made strides, they're still stuck in that place. They hit the glass ceiling. They just can't seem to get any farther. Maybe it's because of who they've got on their roster. Maybe it's the leadership. I mean, I do think they're in a better place now, of course. But honestly, he's going to be looking for a payday. He's going to be looking for the chance to be the man. And so give him a couple more years, not to mention he and Steph are teammates right now on Team USA. And I think that's critical as well. That relationship could develop. I know it's nuts, but maybe a couple of years down the road, they're able to pitch Anthony Edwards on being the man, the guy who replaces Steph and pursues championships in Warriors fashion.
Okay. I mean, that would be best case scenario if somehow the timelines worked out to
Right?
fit that. And that's the thing about the NBA is you can't really play the guessing game. Like I was going to throw you some names of free agents in 2026, like Trae Young, Jared Allen, and Luca. I love all three, obviously,
Luca.
but like they may not be free agents in 2026. They
Right.
may have some extensions to where, or they could be traded before then to where it's a completely different story. I looked at Jamal Murray next offseason. Is he really the cornerstone piece that's going to get you over the top? The answer is probably no. Then I look at disgruntled stars potentially this upcoming season. Giannis has been connected to the Bay so many times. Maybe his name gets brought up again, and then the Warriors flirt with bringing him home.
But he's
bring him
not going to
home.
run the
It's not
team,
Greece,
though.
but
I mean, they
yeah.
needed Drew Holiday to win the championship. Along with he and Chris Middleton, they had to have a driver. You had to have a quarterback, and they didn't win until Drew got there.
Yeah, and you bring that up. The Warriors, that's the one thing that they do not have. Like they have elite athleticism. They have some shooters. They have so a nice mix of veterans and mid-level players and young guys. They don't have that quarterback unless so many people are talking about how Brandon Bajemski's a shooting guard, and maybe this year he is the starting shooting guard, and that's just kind of a smokescreen to have him start next to Steph Curry. But what we saw from him in the summer league and the way that he was facilitating, maybe behind the scenes, the Dubs truly believe, and this is why Lauri Markkanen's not in the Warriors uniform right now. Maybe they believe that he is that floor general of the future, maybe not the cornerstone, but he's what starts things off, gets them in the right direction. And then from there, they go get their Jared Allen or their Jamal Murray or whoever may be available in free agency once some of these contracts start coming off the books. So it's a hard game to play, but it's great for podcasts because, it gets everyone's mind spinning a bit.
Well, I know they don't want to be a lottery pick, but Cooper Flagg is out there and is available coming soon to an NBA team near you. Oh
I've
my
heard all
gosh,
about
can
him.
you
Yep.
imagine?
Yep, I've heard all about him. Amy, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Of course.
We were due for this. We've been talking about it for the last year, and now that I'm hosting the show with Kylan, you were one of my first calls. So thanks for coming on, and be sure to catch Amy on the late night program After Hours with Amy Lawrence. Check your local listings and give her a
11
follow
p Pacific. 11 p
Yeah.
Pacific.
And give her a follow on Twitter at ALaw Radio. So Amy Lawrence, thank you for joining the show today. And everyone, thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen of every day. Peace, everyone.